Well, this is one I've been dreading making all day, to be honest. England versus Slovakia, winning 2-1 in extra time thanks to goals from Clutch, Jude Bellingham and Harry Kane, getting England through to the quarterfinals in the scrappiest of ways. And it looked like Gareth Southgate's reign was ending in the worst fashion. It was reminiscent of 2016, Iceland beating England 2-1, and that spelled the end of Hodgson's reign. You'd be forgiven for thinking this was kind of a mirror image. Both teams that play in blue, just different shades, and that would have been a horrific way for England to go out. Now, after rewatching the game and giving myself 24 hours to compose my thoughts on it, I need to express my thoughts on this game. I'm going to explain all my points as best I can when going through the tactical state of this game. And I'm going to say this now, and I need you to listen and hear me out throughout the entirety of it while I say this, because I may say some things that you're not going to agree with, but that's why I just kind of need you to, hear me out until I'm done with what I'm about to say. At the risk of you losing respect for me, I'm just going to come out with it. I don't think Gareth Southgate tactically got this one wrong at all. I actually think tactically, he approached this one decently. And before you click off, before you send me all the hate mail in the world that many will think I deserve from that, where he did get it wrong, because he did get things wrong, was what he's gone wrong throughout this tournament so far, and that was his player selection. I think there was a clear way of getting change out of the Slovakia setup and hurting them, and offering a lot more balance than we've seen from this England side. Perfect? Absolutely not. But it felt like there was an attempt to rectify tactical mistakes and really get better levels of cohesion out of certain areas of the pitch. But where he made that call tactically, he didn't equalise it by making some big calls to drop players. Mainu came in and was fantastic. Him and Rife offered the perfect balance. Walker is having a horrific tournament. He's missed a big choice there, and the big one that we can all see, Phil Foden on this left-hand side, was poor against Slovakia, and so was Jude Bellingham and Harry Kane, to be fair, but they are capable of coming up with what they came up with, which was big moments at big occasions. Phil Foden is not that player, and I think his role has been really misunderstood in terms of how to get the best out of this England side and how to get the best out of him, and as a result, it's Southgate trying to force too many of our best players into a system that's clearly not made for them. Now, again, I'm going to explain my points here, and again, please just hear me out when I do this, because I know I've probably upset a few with you already. England in their original build-up stage were in a 2-4-1-3, with the full-back spreading wide and the two holding midfielders sitting in between them. Bellingham offering a shorter passing option than the front three, who would stick typically wide. Foden, I feel like, had a bit more of an instruction to hold that width on the left-hand side in these deeper areas, wasn't coming into this pocket here and forcing Trippier up into this attacking state early, so it meant that the opposition could press him over to this side and squeeze him. It was a lot more reserved and it was a lot more patient and restricted, in a good way though. It offered a lot more rigidity to what England were trying to do. So Foden was stuck high up, Harry Kane as the striker against the centre-back or centre-backs. And Slovakia approached this bravely, to be fair. I think their pressing and off-the-ball structure was brilliant throughout the game, and they adapted to the changes that England made consistently well as well. You'd have Duda moving alongside Strelic as the strikers in this off-the-ball shape, with Lobotka and Kuchka in the centre midfield slots. And Duda and Strelic would mark Rice and Mainu in these situations, with Lobotka and Kuchka just behind them, where they would then try to shadow these players before moving up to Stones and Gahey to press them, with Kuchka and Lobotka following suit and really pin them into this area of the pitch. Did Slovakia, again, really good off-the-ball shape. They defend and press well as a unit, and the nature of England's full-backs really helped them form a solid line. But where England adapted even first half was having Stones move in a little bit more central and having Walker drop a little bit deeper into this area, which then meant that Jude Bellingham had more space to operate in this area of the pitch, because there wasn't really a marking structure to deal with him. Slovakia aren't one of those teams that like to commit a centre-back to the press, because there's a bit of a lack of mobility in that back line. You think of Pekarik at right back, who's 38 years old or whatever he is. There's certain players you don't want to isolate one-on-one, especially against the athletic nature of some of England's players. So Bellingham was able to pick this ball up in these situations quite often and quite easily and progress the play to try and find the likes of Kane and Foden who would make runs. And to be fair, when Jude got the ball in these positions and he was driving at the back line, Kane and Foden did really good jobs, and this is where I talk about the balance that was increased with this England team from Gareth Southgate. Is it felt like there was more of an attempt at a systematic play with this England team as Foden and Kane would make those runs, and you get Trippier attacking this area of the pitch as well. So whether it was Bellingham, whether it was Foden, he could find those runs of Kieran Trippier, and Trippier did get in a number of times on that left hand side, especially at the start of the second half where Foden had a disallowed goal, and early in the first half as well, where he hit a shot that I don't think has hit the ground yet. So they were able to create chances using an improved balance and an improved sense of width on that left-hand side from those two players. Was it enough, and did it happen as commonly? Absolutely not, and that goes against Gareth Southgate, because think of the way Kieran Trippier attacked that space. Made for Anthony Gordon. It's made for someone who's used to making those direct movements from out to in on his stronger foot. So, you know, as much as it's a positive for Southgate, it's a negative for him at the same time. And Bellingham getting free a lot pushed the Slovakia shape back, and this is what England's shape looked like when this happened. It's the 3-2-5, as we commonly see from teams, sometimes turn into a sort of 2-2-6 or a 3-1-6, with Kyle Walker overlapping in this area of the pitch, allowing Saka to move into the half space, Bellingham moving closer to Kane, and again trying to attack down that way. But Kyle Walker was getting caught too much on the transition, and as the game wore on, he wasn't overlapping as much, and Saka was having to control that right flank. And Saka did have a couple bright moments. You'd be forgiven for thinking that Saka's been poor, because you hear a lot of people slating his performance. I don't think he's been amazing, but I think Saka's been decent. I think he's been a source of an outball throughout this tournament from the deeper players to get into those positions. Doesn't get the support that's needed at points, because on his side is typically Jude Bellingham, who isn't positionally disciplined and does have a tendency to go wandering from these areas and look for the ball in deeper areas. So he's having to deal with a lot of isolation on that right-hand side, which hasn't helped him at all. But again, as much as I'm saying tactically this improved, the nature of which England moved the ball around was so sluggish at points. We just do not move the ball around quick enough at all. And Slovakia's shape in this area was fantastic. They pressed when they needed to press, with the wide players moving up to the wide centre-backs in this area. Trans and Haraslin, with Duda pushing up to Strelic and Kuchka and Lobotka pressing up into Mainu and Rice. And they did a really good job as well of shadowing their press to cut off the passing lane into Bellingham and into Foden in these areas, to cover two players at once, pressing up to Rice and Mainu, but making sure there wasn't an easy pass into Foden and Bellingham, and they did such a good job of that. And in the second half, England adapted well to it, and that was through one simple tactical change, which was dropping Rice a little bit further back to create a back four and spread that England defensive shape wider. Mainu operating as the sole player in between the defence and attack to move around Slovakia's shape better, because they were narrow naturally to try and prevent that build-up, as England's build-up was narrow. But they did cope with it really well, as Trans would go up to press the player on the ball in this position, Gahey. Kuchka would be a bit more wary of Foden, and if Trippier came short for the pass, Peckerick would move up and block that pass as quickly as he could. Slovakia adapted to it brilliantly, to be fair, and as much as England were trying things out, Slovakia always looked prepared, and that's maybe a question as to why they ended up conceding as late in the game as they did when they conceded so much pressure. Is in this system, it really did require a lot of work from these players to keep moving between markers, and they were defending in a 4 at the back, not a 5 at the back, so that's a lot more ground for those defenders to cover. So as a result, England really struggled to make the most out of that tactical change, but it did offer them a new way to play. Declan Rice was unleashed a little bit more, and Mainu was given more time to use his press resistance to break the lines, and Bellingham or Foden could drop alongside him. Now, where Southgate really let himself down in this game was his substitutes. The fact that we didn't see a substitute until like the 65th minute, which was only because of injury, and that was Trippier coming off to be replaced by Saka at left back, as Cole Palmer could come into this place here with Kyle Walker overlapping at right back. Changes were made late on with Tony and Eze coming on for Mainu and for Phil Foden, was not good enough. It really was not. And you know, it's not just how you set up at the start of the game, and which is something that Southgate's sort of been good at in previous tournaments. It's how you adapt to game states going forward, and Slovakia are always willing to adapt throughout their game. With the substitutes they made, they resorted to a back 5 at points to really keep England out, and they showed how you can approach tactically games of this manner, and England did not do well enough to cope with it, and as a result meant that it was scrappy, and some individual quality really got them through in that game. But we're going to go over how Slovakia approached the game in their attacking sense. Now, when Slovakia would build up, they would build up in their sort of 4-3-3 shape typically, and England went man-to-man with their press from goal kicks, and it wasn't so reserved. It wasn't England sitting deep like they usually were, which they've been criticised a lot for, and they got criticised a lot for it in this game with the sitting deep, and they didn't sit deep in this game. They went for it, they tried to press them, and I actually think the pressing caused England some serious issues for what we'll go over for the Slovakia goal in a minute, but also with this. So it would force the defenders into an isolated 1v1 as Kieran Trippier would come up to press the right back, as Phil Foden was pressing the right centre back, Kane on the left centre back, Saka on the left back, and the midfield three up against the midfield three. Gahey was pressing like a left back up against Schranz, who was the right winger, and so it was getting pulled apart and isolated. And there was a couple of ways that Slovakia beat this. One was through playing it to Lobotka, who's fantastically press resistant and can play it round the corner in these sharp, smart little cute passes to get the attack going, or going direct up to Strelic, who got the beating of Stones and Gahey aerially all game. This is the issue we've got coming into this tournament with no Harry Maguire, is a lack of a real aerial presence in the back line for us, and he was winning these duels all day. And as a result, it caused Kyle Walker to panic and come across, which then gave Haraslin the little bits of space he needed to overlap and attack the space in behind Walker, and Walker was losing him all game. He really lacked the confidence with Stones to beat his marker, so we would always tend to get pulled over here, and ended up performing poorly in his own job of marking the left winger because he was just sort of caught in between two players. And nothing illustrates that more, by the way, than the goal, which we're going to go over now. So the issue with the complete man marking system is all it takes is one person to lose their marker, one person to become free, and everything falls apart like a house of cards. And in this case, Kuchka moved up into the front line alongside Schranz and Strelic, and Haraslin, who you can't see, who's off screen just behind Walker. Kuchka then pushes up onto Stones, which then means Kyle Walker has to come across and try and cover Strelic while keeping an eye on his man. Gahey is also getting pulled in towards Kuchka in a reactive sense, so Schranz is able to run off the back of him as I just move it to the next picture. And now you see this really starting to take effect. Stones and Gahey are too reactive and aren't communicating enough to not have both of them go and attack the ball with Kuchka. They both go over there. Schranz is able to make a horizontal move into space in the middle of the park, and Walker is caught in between Strelic and Haraslin. He doesn't know whether to come tight to one or drop in on the other, and he's caught in between two. He's in a bit of no man's land. As I move this on, the ball then goes to Strelic as Stones tries to recover towards him, as Walker comes across to him now. Both again in a 2-on-1 situation on the marker because they're panicked and reacting. Gahey at this point has lost control of his situation with Schranz and isn't sure where he is, and Schranz is now able to make a movement off the back of him, and Haraslin has all the space in the world on this left hand side. You can see the space he's moving into, which causes Kyle Walker to panic. As you can see here, his body position's a bit all over the place, and this is why he ends up so deep when the pass is played to Schranz from Strelic, because he's had to panic, turn around and get his bearings, and he doesn't realise where Haraslin is. Gahey doesn't catch up with the run. Schranz is able to make the move off the back of him because Gahey's been caught coming over to a player that he's not supposed to be marking. Stones is too far off of Strelic. The ball goes into Schranz and he puts it right in the bottom corner. You can have you sound Pickford as well that he should have done better for the goal, but it was so poorly organised from an English perspective, and the man marking, as much as I thought it was a brave thing from Southgate to do it with players that clearly aren't as comfortable doing it and don't have that repetition of doing it together and don't have that experience to fall back on with each other, was a pain. So Kyle Walker ends up far too deep now, playing Schranz on. Gahey can't get near him, Stones isn't getting close enough, and it's 1-0 Slovakia, and you can't say it wasn't deserved from the passage of play we've just seen. But as I said when I was doing the analysis, Ivan Toney came on and provided a fantastic contribution coming onto the pitch, and in both goals he was a massive help. So in this one now, we are seeing a couple of things here. I just want to point your attention to Lobotka and Gahey. Lobotka and Gahey look even. They're going a bit shoulder to shoulder. You could argue that the holding midfielder should not be marking the centre-back, but Gahey isn't aerially great, as we've spoken about in this video. Jude is in that position in the centre of the box, who was the eventual goal scorer, and Gajumba, who was a Slovakian centre-back who came on in the second half to try and shore it up, is in front of him. As you can see there's no real direct path into Jude, as Gajumba is in his view. As the throw-in comes in from Kyle Walker, Gahey and Lobotka are getting into a tussle. Gahey has got himself in front of Lobotka now. Lobotka's panicked and has got himself into a bit of no man's land with Gahey, and as a result, Gahey is in control of the situation. Tony then moves over to Guyumba to get his body against him and push him back. He's blocking that run and forcing him into the edge of the 6-yard box. Gahey gets the knock on, the ball goes into the area where, if you remember a couple pictures before, Guyumba would have been standing and have been able to challenge that ball, but as a result, Tony providing a selfless role in this team to provide that opening for Jude Bellingham, who produced a moment of magic that only he in this England team, I think, is capable of to win the game and get England to extra time. So you have to give Southgate credit. As much as the subs should have come earlier, Tony was used in the right instance and used his physical presence to disrupt that Slovakian set piece, and full credit to him. And of course the individual quality of Jude, and this is why you don't take players like Jude Bellingham off. Individual quality wins you games sometimes. We're going to go over the second goal as well, which happened in the 91st minute despite this happening in the 95th. I think Ivan Toney has earned himself the right now as being first sub for England in this tournament. As you can see, he's pulled into this right half space position to be the more direct option from the back, which he is, sticking close to Saka so he can remain close in second ball opportunities. Skriniar has gone up to press Ivan Toney to try and win the ball, and as a result he's got himself pulled into a position where he's not comfortable with. Skriniar isn't mobile and doesn't deal well when having to recover back into position once he's lost his first challenge. So the ball goes to Saka. Toney then runs off the back of Skriniar, who can't recover in time. I haven't marked his name, but Guyumba is the centre-back that's closer to him as well, and Guyumba really struggles with Ivan Toney, didn't cope with him well. I have a feeling I'm not saying his name correctly, by the way, but sorry. I'm not familiar with Slovakian names. So Saka and Toney link up. He's got the run of Skriniar now. Skriniar can't get back into space quick enough. Toney is now in this position with Guyumba, who's had to come across and cover. Guyumba gets himself pulled into a situation he's not comfortable with, fouls Ivan Toney, which results in the free kick that England go and score from. And there's two things I'm going to point out. Ivan Toney is attacking the far post. As you can see, he's made a movement inside to come and attack whatever could happen at the far post. Lobotka is in a bit of no man's land, and as you can see, there's Saka, and what you can't see on the left hand side is Ebieze waiting on the edge of the box. Lobotka should be marking that area on the edge of the box, and he's nowhere near. Header goes out. Eze then has the opportunity to shoot from that area. Lobotka can't get close enough to him. There's 3 players on the edge of the box that he's left vacant. And Ivan Toney peels off now after making that movement in, peels off to the outside, and he then gets lucky with the scuff shot from Eze, who heads it back across goal, and Kane scores and makes it 2-1. So little bits of individual brilliance, and you have to give full credit to Ivan Toney. His influence was huge on England winning this game in both goals. His physicality, his direct nature, and his technical ability to link up as well was fantastic, and full credit to him. Southgate got away with one. As much as there were some positives, there were some really poor moments of decision making, which on another day costs him his job. England playing Switzerland in the quarterfinals now, and that is going to be an interesting game, and England have to be at their best because this Switzerland team tactically are on another level. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Cheers for watching, lads. In a bit.